Welcome to the Good Shepherd and the Child podcast, where we explore the spirituality of the Christian child through the method of the catechesis of the Good Shepherd. I'm your host, Carrie Mecchi Lozano. Today, we have a very unique episode that I'm really excited to share with you. So Mirrione, who is our National Director of the United States Association of Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, she's joins me in a conversation with Ruth Ehrhardt, who is a South African traditional midwife. And she partners with Karen Slayball, who we had on the podcast back in June to talk about Adela Kostanyoki. And so Ruth and Karen partnered up to create this really beautiful course called The Basic Needs of Babies that Mary and I both took in preparation for the work with the infant toddler work for Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. There were many, many, many things in that course that we could isolate and talk about with you. But one of the things that we wanted to sit and ponder with is this idea of the hormone of oxytocin, the love hormone. And what is this hormone? But also, how does this hormone connect to and relate to our work in the atrium with children and with God? I hope you enjoy. Ruth and Mary, welcome to the Good Shepherd and the Child podcast.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you so much.
Would each of you tell us a little bit about who you are? Ruth, since this is the first time that you've been on the podcast, I would love for you to start.
Well, thank you. I feel really honored to be here. So my name is Ruth Ehrhardt, and I am a mother and a midwife and the daughter of a midwife and the author of a little book called The Basic Needs of a Woman in Labor. And I live in South Africa. This is where I live and work and raise my children.
We had the beautiful privilege of meeting you when we did the Basic Needs of Babies course with Karen, who we had on the podcast just a month or two ago. That has been such a gift. And I love your book. I got your book. And
yes, me too.
It's so beautiful and essential. And I shared it with my midwife and told her that this is exactly what a good birthing class should all encompass. Essential and right to the point. I love it. Thank you for that gift.
Thank you.
Mary, would you like to share a little bit about yourself?
Yes. And I want to join with you, Carrie, because we were both in that course together, just in thanking you, Ruth, because that Montessori for Life Basic Needs of Babies really, I want to say both the content and the container just fed my life, my spirit, so deeply and so richly that I am very, very grateful. And I think, just sits within, or sits with, this spirit that we have with our work with children in Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. I am also a mother and a daughter and a grandmother. I delight in being a grandmother. I've been a catechist in the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd for, I think it's 33 years now. I coordinated the work in my parish as it grew from a small farming community to a large suburb. I've been the Association Catechesis of the Good Shepherd's United States Association National Director for the past 13 years, and I delight in being a catechist in all the levels that we have, but particularly with the infant toddler group that we have now. I've been in with the littlest ones for the past 5 years, and really am astonished and amazed at who they are and the joy of being with them and with their parents.
Thank you. Thank you both. So one of the topics of the many topics that came up for us in the Basic Needs of Babies course is this topic of oxytocin. And as we pondered it more and more, we realized what a powerful hormone it is, but also its place in our work with children. And so we wanted to bring Ruth on the podcast to explain what is oxytocin and just kind of explore that question of how does this hormone affect our work in the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. So, Ruth, would you tell us, let's start, just what is it? What is oxytocin?
Well, oxytocin is very simply put the love hormone. And I work with it very much in relation to pregnancy and birth. So it definitely starts to be cultivated in the pregnancy. So when the mother is pregnant and, growing her baby, one of the things that starts to happen is that she starts to prepare for the birth, and you'll definitely notice that as a pregnancy progresses, especially towards the end of a pregnancy, that women will often say, "Oh, I've got a bit of a pregnant brain." They start to become forgetful and all of that, and that's actually one of the things that oxytocin actually requires is for the brain not to be, or the thinking brain not to be functioning too much. It's actually a bit of an inhibitor for oxytocin. And there's a softening that starts to happen in the mother emotionally as well, as she starts to prepare to meet her child. And oxytocin is the hormone that brings the surges, the contractions in labor. It is the hormone that the mother releases immediately after birth, and in fact, that is the time when a woman will release the most oxytocin that she will ever release in her entire life. Is the moment after birth, in the hour after birth, when she's meeting her child. And all mammals do this, and that's what bonds us to our children. And it is the hormone that is released during breastfeeding. It's what allows for what people call the letdown reflex, for the milk to flow. And, I know of women, for example, who have gone back to work, a month or 2 or 3 or 4 after giving birth. And then they're needing to, let's say, pump milk at work, and they're struggling to do that. And one of the ways that they support themselves in doing that is actually by, placing a picture of their child in front of them. And then when they see the picture of their child, their milk is able to flow because oxytocin is able to be released. So it's very much the bonding hormone. It's it's also released when we're eating a delicious meal, or when we're with a group of people that makes us just feel like we belong. Our communities, our families. It's the hormone that's released during lovemaking, during orgasm. So it pops up in all kind of lovely aspects of life, shall I say?
Right. No pun intended, I love this hormone, and I find it so fascinating, because I feel like it explains a lot of things, especially when you're aware of it. I have taught all of my children about oxytocin, and especially my teenagers. Like, I always kind of joke with them because they're very aware of what this hormone is, because I also feel like that it helps understand our bodies, but also understand sex and why sex is so important, and why it's not a casual thing. Because when you bond to somebody on this deep level through the hormone of oxytocin, there's a reason why you have bonded to this person. There's a reason why it's a unique thing that is happening. And so I love this idea that right after birth, you've just gone through this insane, intense, beautiful thing. And the object that has, quote unquote, caused it, you are now madly in love with, because you have had this huge surge of oxytocin. God is so good in how he has created that connection right then. And no wonder, like right after birth, you almost start to forget the intensity of what you just experienced. And it's because of this beautiful hormone. One of the things that came up in our course that I liked is we read an article about hugging for 20 seconds. A good hug increases oxytocin. I was like, oh, that's good. I need to give longer hugs.
Exactly. It does make us think just about how do we establish connection, and are we actually doing it enough? And are we actually allowing, do we have practices in place that actually allow for oxytocin to flow more in our lives and in our families' lives? Yeah. And through appreciation, it can just be done through language as well, just by practicing gratitude and appreciating one another. So it is a very special hormone, and one we should definitely cultivate.
Well, can you speak into that? What are some ways that we can cultivate it?
Well, I think using the language of appreciation, with our loved ones, with our work colleagues, I think. The way the world is set up, and you see it with social media. It's like just the thought of social media. I really just feel a pit, like forming in my stomach. It's just this habit to tearing each other down and of criticizing whereas if we could get into a habit of actually just looking at what is there to appreciate and love in this particular situation, and I think. One of the things that I've learned to cultivate and really do as part of my care in the pregnancy is to cultivate oxytocin in the mother by appreciating her, by loving her, by making her laugh. And it's not done in a superficial way. It's a genuine getting to know her, listening to her, like understanding her, and understanding her family, understanding their cultural practices, what their needs are, what their dreams are, how they're wanting to bring this child into the world, how do they want to welcome this child into the world. And so every time we meet, there's an opportunity for deep listening, appreciation, loving, just loving her, but also loving touch, so that when I am interacting with her, whether it's taking a blood pressure or touching her belly, it's all done in a way that settles her nervous system and really makes her feel loved. And it kind of sounds a little bit like very simple, but it's not something we receive on a daily basis, especially in professional interactions. Like everything can be quite cold and professional and separate. And whereas something as personal as creating a family, being a family, becoming a family, to be able to firstly have the honor of being able to be included in that, as the midwife or as the caregiver or as the doula or as the postpartum person, is an honor, and I feel like I need to really treat it as such. But what a wonderful thing to be able to support the pregnant woman in being able to cultivate that in herself. So instead of coming away from an antenatal checkup worrying about her blood pressure or worrying about the size of her baby or worrying about, because that's often what happens, is that women come away from their antenatal checks always with an issue, and that's what they spend the next month or whatever it is, the next 2 weeks, worrying about or thinking about. Whereas what I really try to do is to create a culture where she comes away from her antenatal check really feeling, like I said, firstly loved, but also just feeling like quite sure of herself, like trusting herself, trusting her body, trusting her baby, having a connection with her baby, I think is also very important. And then the other thing that I try to encourage as well is that she practices self-care, which is not easy. I mean, it's easier in the first pregnancy, but the more children we have, the harder that is. But, they're just small things that we can make space for in our day that reminds us that we matter. And it really can be a small thing like, being able to drink out of your favorite tea out of your favorite mug, or and being able to possibly have that undisturbed, or to be able to go for a walk barefoot on the sand if you live near the sea, or whatever it might be, to just cultivate something in your own day that says back to you that you matter. And and then again, that's very unique for each person, because for some people it's about being social, for some people it's about being alone, for some people it's about maybe doing something like having your nails done or going to a movie. For other people it's spending time in nature. So again, it's different for each person, but what brings you joy, what brings you happy?
And it's nurturing that within us, right? I mean, like you say, it's different for different people, but the sense that it needs to be nurtured and not ignored, which means also it needs to be understood, like to recognize the gift that it is for us, because doesn't it also I'm not even sure how to pose this question, Ruth, but like how it is within the mother will be also how it will be for the child, right? I mean, like if it's not accessed, then what? You know what I mean? Then it's not something easily accessed within the child either, right?
Yeah, I can't say for sure because I don't remember necessarily that for myself when I was in utero. But I think we definitely need to grow a culture of really taking care of pregnant women because of exactly that, because of the direct impact it has on the baby. And I think in many ways babies are cushioned from like the true harsh reality of the outside world just by the fact that they're in this enclosed warm space, in the amniotic fluid. It's dark, they're close to this heartbeat, there's a regularity and a rhythm that they sense of safety that babies are held in just purely because they're within their mother and they're so part of her. There's that real sense of belonging, but absolutely I think we just across the world, I think we have just so lost a culture of really honoring, revering, understanding, and taking care of pregnant women and new mothers. I mean, just the amount of new mothers who have to leave their children from very, very young in order to go and work. Just it's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking, and so. Yeah, I mean, I think if I was to, send a message out to the world or want to teach anything, it really is that better understanding of really revering and honoring pregnant women and early motherhood and early babyhood. Yeah,
yeah. A long time ago, like I want to say 14 years ago, when my son was a baby, I listened to a talk, and I will always be sad that I can't remember who the doctor was and what the talk was called in order to reference it properly. But I listened to a talk, and the doctor said, if we wanted to invest in the future of our world, we should make pregnant women happy. Because he was talking about the effect that happiness in a pregnant woman, peace in a pregnant woman, oxytocin in a pregnant woman, and how it affects the biology, physiology, psychology, all of that of both the mother and the baby. If we wanted to invest in the future of our world, make pregnant women happy.
See, it seems so simple. Yeah.
Yes. But our world is so different. I mean, I go back, 45 years to the birth of my first daughter, and now with them all having children of their own, my daughters really think that I was a hippie, that I really did have a very beautiful experience, and I didn't have a lot of information. I had some, Lamaze and such, but really, it was a very beautiful experience. I remember, I will never forget that I didn't know what it was, that it was a flood of oxytocin, but I remember when my first was born and placed in my arms, my doctor and my husband thought I was crazy because I just said, "Oh, it's a baby." But that was just like, I had no words because I was so flooded and full. And for my daughters, I've always been sad because there's so much information out there for them. They did actually spend a lot of time worrying through the pregnancy. You know what I mean? Like they just... I always felt like there's so much that was out there was telling them, you don't know what you're doing it all wrong. And that just took away from this, incredible, beautiful gift.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Ruth, could you speak into how we can create environments? Like what physically does an environment look like that fosters more oxytocin?
specifically for birth?
Well, let's go with birth, but I bet it also applies, like the environment that, yes, for birth, I think we could also say is probably very similar to any other environment where we want to foster oxytocin.
Yeah, I mean, I think for birth specifically, I think the situation is quite acute, and so it's maybe a more obvious one, but actually a very good example of how you would create that is, the example of lovemaking, or the example of needing to go to the lavatory, or even trying to go to sleep, and all of those are involuntary functions. They are all situations that actually work better the less we do. And the more we try to make them happen, the less they want to happen. And they actually require certain environmental factors to be in place in order for them to just happen spontaneously. And so that's why bathrooms, we close the door and we create an environment for ourselves where we're comfortable and we don't like to be interrupted. Poor mothers, kind of have to figure out how to do that. But we all know people who can't go unless they're in their own home, and with lovemaking as well, it's a certain environment that needs to be a place, certain person who has to be present. It can't just happen anywhere or with anyone, and we definitely can't do it with a bunch of observers around. And it's the same with falling asleep. We can't have bright lighting. We couldn't have somebody standing over us, shouting at us to go to sleep. It just wouldn't work. And so it's very interesting that we've created these environments for birth where we're trying to force something to happen, which actually requires us to step back and almost guard the process, protect the process. And like, if I was to describe the personality of oxytocin, it would be a shy, it has a shy personality. It's it's the child that is very confident within their family environment, but the moment a visitor arrives, becomes very, very shy, and kind of hides behind their mother's skirt. That's kind of how I imagine oxytocin, or a friend of mine has cats who also are super playful when it's just her, but I've actually hardly ever seen them, because whenever there's a visitor, they hide behind the cupboard. But I have seen videos of them playing, so I know it's true. And so oxytocin is just something that's actually quite magical, because it really does require for us to trust that it does work. But it really, like that child, like those cats, it requires that sense of safety, that sense of just absolute belonging and just being able to let go. And so that's why, earlier on I was speaking about the thinking brain needing to be switched off. So similar to sleep, and similar to lovemaking, and similar to needing to go to the loo, it's not something we can think about. Like, the more we think about it, the more we think about trying to make it happen, actually the less likely it is to happen. And so oxytocin, just like when you spoke about the example of a hug, like initially a hug can be a little bit awkward, and it can be, it can feel a bit weird. But then when those 20 seconds have elapsed, that's when we start to kind of settle into it, and we're comfortable, and the brain actually starts to quieten down. We're not thinking about it so much anymore, because our bodies are now responding to that sense of safety, that sense of belonging. And the thinking brain is the one thing that can really stand in the way. So like a lot of talking, especially talking which stimulates the thinking brain, like asking about how long somebody's been in labor for, or, how many centimeters is she? These are all quite also adrenalizing questions, and adrenaline is another factor we want to keep away from oxytocin, because they have an antagonistic relationship. So when somebody is charged, when somebody is angry, when somebody is anxious, these can all be suppressants for oxytocin. And so it's very important that if we're in a space where we're trying to cultivate oxytocin, if somebody is feeling angry or somebody is feeling anxious, that we work with that, because we can't, it can't be allowed to continue in that environment if we want oxytocin to flourish. And oxytocin also doesn't like to be observed. So it's a good idea to kind of keep eyes low. As a birth attendant, I really see myself more as a birth guardian. And so
Right.
it's really about kind of keeping the wrong elements out, embodying a sense of safety, in terms of what I hold in my body as well. Like, I have to be quite aware of where I am at. Where is my head? Where is my heart? Where is my body? What am I bringing into the space? I'm not nothing. I am an element in the environment, and so I really have to, as a birth attendant, cultivate in myself like low levels of adrenaline, and also, kind of dull my own thinking a little bit, and almost kind of bring quite a sleepy feeling into the space. And oxytocin, like if I walk into, a house and a woman is in strong labor, even before I hear her, I can feel when there's a lot of oxytocin in the space. And it's got this very mushy, very lovely, almost soupy feel to it. I would describe it as like very strong life force. Like you can definitely feel it when you step into an environment where oxytocin is flowing strongly. And it also always makes me a little bit sleepy, which I find interesting. It's almost like it's forcing my thinking brain to kind of be a little bit suppressed. Yeah. I hope that answers your
It does.
question.
No, it does, in such a beautiful way.
Yeah, and it brings a question to mind, because as you speak, I think about being in the atrium environment with the children, but being with like 3-year-olds or even 18-month-olds, like because you said something about, well, you didn't say silence, but we do cultivate silence within these environments, and I feel like, I don't know if I feel sleepy in it, but like that feeling that you're speaking of, Ruth, like I feel like I have participated in that, maybe not to the degree as in a birthing situation, but in an atrium environment, that, and particularly with maybe some of the presentations we have, or just even the silence exercises that we might do, that the children, like, they really settle so beautifully into that. They become like gentler and sweeter and more loving. Like there's some presentations that might be really big, but then when we go to work after, there's like you can feel the love. I mean, that's how I think about it. You can feel the love in this room. Yeah. Like I think Montessori talked about this after the experiment in Barcelona with the atrium, where she talked about an inner sensitivity that she called like the religious sense or the spiritual sense. And of course, see, then for me, I think, well, okay, but with oxytocin, we're talking about our bodies, but yet how is our spirit like also contributing or working with, like, because that's what we are, right? We're body, mind, and soul, like we're one. And how, how amazing are we made, physically rooted and grounded in love from the moment we enter into this world, and can we make that time and space for the mother and child? I mean, we, in Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, we put a lot of time into preparing a spiritual environment, a religious environment for the children, where they come, for 2 hours a week. And we put a lot of work into that. And then I think, oh my goodness, like, shouldn't we be doing that for every child that enters into the world, for every mother? Because isn't that even so much more from the beginning important, that we know this love, that we can access, like we're made to love each other. Right?
I love this. I think that's why I'm so drawn to this as a topic for us, because I feel like everything that you were describing, Ruth, maybe not every little detail because it is specific to birth,
Right.
but an environment that fosters oxytocin, an environment that fosters this hormone that creates bonds and relationship, and how similar that is to what we are trying to do in the environment with the children, which with their relationship with God. The darker lights, for it not to be overstimulating, like we want it to be simple and beautiful. We want it to be quiet. It's not perfectly quiet, but it's so calm. And just like what you were describing with the birth and how you can feel the oxytocin, just like Mary said, you can feel.
I mean, I didn't know it was oxytocin. Like, I didn't, you know what I mean? It just, but when you speak of it, I say, yeah, I know that.
Yeah. And how beautiful. So that means that's oxytocin that's bonding the people in the room with God. That's what's happening in that room.
Absolutely.
So fostering how for us to be conscious, I think, of this love hormone, this bonding hormone, as we're preparing our environment, both physically, like putting things on walls and stuff, but also on a daily basis. How am I preparing this environment before the children arrive and while the children are there that creates an oxytocin-rich environment? Like that, like you were saying about adrenaline. Like I always imagine it like a seesaw, right? So how do I keep the adrenaline low in this atrium so that the oxytocin can increase and then there can be bonding, a relationship growth between the humans in the room and God?
Absolutely.
It's a fascinating thought. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, when you were speaking about preparing the environment now, there are so many things that have been popping into my head while you've both been speaking. I mean, we could have this conversation for hours, I think. But it was just reminding me of when my children were little and I was homeschooling and Montessori homeschooling. And, our home was very much, a prepared environment for them. I think much more for them than it was for the adults, actually, sometimes. But there were those days where I would get so kind of frustrated and fixated on, doing it right. And I could feel that there was this tension building up inside me. And I could just feel that I was just going to actually mess it all up. And those were the days where it was best for us to just go and sit in the garden and just be together in the garden, in nature. And it was just always such a good reminder of that we were the environment, actually, and that it was about our relationships and our connections and about taking care of each other and our communication and all of that.
I love that.
And yeah,
we are the environment.
Yeah, we are so much. And I think that's exactly, it goes back to when we take care of pregnant mothers, because she is the environment for the child that she is growing. And again, in the immediate postpartum phase as well. I mean, my sister's just given birth to twins 2 weeks ago, 2 little girls. Beautiful birth.
So wonderful.
Yeah, it's so wonderful. It was such a special birth. And at the moment, I'm so proud of her because she's just, really embodying being with these babies, but she's also just got really good support, and a friend has moved in and is just doing everything. It's an old childhood friend, and she's cooking and she's cleaning and she's just making it possible for my sister to just be with these babies. And it just can just really see what a difference it makes, because she's just able to love them and feed them and sleep with them and just bring them that sense of belonging, which is the imprint we want to give to every new human on this planet.
That's right.
That's what oxytocin does. It gives us that sense of I belong. And if we can cultivate that in every child that goes out into the world, I mean, it would transform humanity and the world.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is anybody else imagining like fairy dust, like oxytocin? You just want to spread it like fairy dust. Just be like, you're going down the grocery store and you're just like tossing it on people to help them have more and more. If it was only that easy. But a concept though, like if we think about it, okay, we can't throw fairy dust of oxytocin out, but we can look people in the eye more. We
Yes.
can help people not feel fear and adrenaline when we're having conversations with them, or,
Right.
give people longer hugs, or help
Right.
people, just a little bit more be conscious of oxytocin in our environments and in our relationship to help, throw
I
out
mean,
more
we
oxytocin
we
dust.
focus a lot. I mean, in our catechesis with the Good Shepherd, we focus a lot on recognizing the gift, the many gifts that God has surrounded us with. It's certainly something that young children are very good at, because they see with such eyes, and we can see with their eyes. I mean, we can enjoy, as you said, Ruth, going out into the garden. I mean, we're just surrounded with, so much.
Gifts.
Yeah, gifts, loving gifts in creation, but we don't tend to think about it that way. How do we continue that? How do we help with that?
And that's similar to what you were saying, Ruth, about gratitude increases oxytocin. So being more like the young child whose natural prayer is gratitude,
Right.
it can increase oxytocin. So
Yeah. I mean, I've been just researching it, in my spare time. Like, that's when I go and I try to read more about oxytocin. But one of the things that I discovered, which I thought was so interesting, and of course I don't have a lot of information on, so maybe I shouldn't say it out loud, but they have this, like, they've developed a nose spray that they sometimes use for different reasons, but it doesn't seem to work the same as it does when the body's producing it.
yeah, that makes sense that it wouldn't.
And that just really goes to, I believe that just goes to our humanity and our desire and vital need to be in relationship with each other.
Yeah.
So you can maybe chemically make it, but it's not just a chemical.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, they use synthetic oxytocin for inducing labor, and they use it for managing the delivery of the placenta. And so it's been synthesized and used now probably for about 40 odd years for doing all of those things, but it does not replace love. It cannot replace love. So it has the like for labor, it will do the physiological thing of contracting the uterus and expanding the placenta, but it doesn't. I mean, women are often traumatized by that experience. Actually, they find it extremely painful. They struggle to bond with their babies afterwards because they haven't actually their bodies haven't had the opportunity to cultivate that true oxytocin. And so I think you're right. Even though it might chemically look like the same thing, there's another element there for it to truly be true oxytocin.
Right. That's a beautiful thought, that we can't replace the relationship. We are relationship people. We as humans, even if you are fed and changed and all the things that you need to physically survive, but you don't have relationship, you will not survive. Like, we are relationship people. We need oxytocin. We need it from other people, other beings, from God.
Definitely. In order to thrive.
Yeah, I mean, it's a gift that we have access to readily, so that we can be in relationship with each other and in relationship with God. I mean, that's how He made us. Right? I mean, this morning's gospel was, I no longer call you slaves, I call you friends. Right? And that goes to this, because He was saying, love one another as I have loved you. And because it is possible for us, because we're made, I mean, spiritually and intellectually, but also physically, in a very real and beautiful way, to love each other.
We were made to be in relationship. Yeah.
And I think the other thing I keep coming back to, which, like, I just want to go and think more, a whole lot more. Or, as you said, Ruth, we could talk all day, about it, is just one of my favorite chapters from Maria Montessori is the last chapter in Absorbent Mind, which is called Love at Its, the chapter is Love at Its Source. And she speaks there, she writes about, the nature of love and what it is. It's beautiful. But she goes on to say that, we make a desert of strife, and God continues to send us children like rejuvenating rain. I mean, I'm not quoting her exactly, but you know what I mean? Like that's what they bring us. And that's what we live in such an amazing way with the birth of every child. And yet we don't recognize the gift most often. Right?
No, but you're absolutely right. Each child, each baby is that unique opportunity to just remember and connect. And I mean, one of my favorite things is, when I'm in the supermarket and there are babies and young children around, is to connect with them and to just be reminded of the simplicity and of the joy. And I mean, obviously at the moment, having these newborn nieces, my favorite thing is to just be able to sit and it's not so much about, I mean, obviously I enjoy holding them or holding one of them, but what's been really wonderful is to just sit and be present with, one of them, and to just be, because that's what they are in that moment.
Right.
It's just like absolute pure presence. And it's just, time kind of disappears, and it's so simple, and it's just such a wonderful reminder of just slowing everything down and being able to do that. And that's why it's such a gift to be able to give that to mothers, because if they can really just be there with their babies in that way, they're both able to just be able to experience that. It's very holy, it's very sacred.
Yes. I agree.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else that either of y'all want to lift up about oxytocin before we finish today?
Something Sophia Cavalletti had written about in Religious Potential of the Child. She says that the child is in need of an infinite global love, and that the child finds that relationship, that love, in their relationship with God, in their attachment with God. So it is, this whole conversation, or this look at, or this thinking of this gift we have in us, oxytocin, that can help us to build our relationships and live out a life of relationship with God and with each other. That the child has such a great desire from the moment of birth, and they're given the gift, or they can be, if we care, if there's a prepared environment, if we help care for that moment, then this is looking at a lifetime of being able to do this. And like you said, Ruth, I'm not sure exactly how you said it, but it was beautiful. Like, we'd be looking at a new humanity, right? Like, I forget exactly what you said. It was beautiful.
And if you think about like what Ruth has lifted up about oxytocin and birth and immediately postpartum, as like a foundation for somebody's ability to have relationships, because of the intense amount of oxytocin that exists at that point in life. Like she said, the highest ever. Man, like, think about the possibility of how that affects your relationship with God, your relationship to bond with God. So if we were to care for these moments better, especially in thinking about oxytocin and how to foster it better, it's a form of religious education. It's a form of spiritual education and spiritual
It's an education
fostering.
to life.
It is.
An education for life.
It's so connected to what we do. It's I feel like it's something that we have to sit and pray about, because it's bigger than us. Well, man, we could keep talking, but I think that we should finish and just kind of sit with this.
I would love to hear Ruth's, I would love for Ruth to just, whatever is on your heart, because you are so precious, Ruth. So is there any last words you have for us?
Well, yeah, it feels like such a huge topic on the one hand, and on the other hand, it feels so simple. It feels so simple. And I think it feels so huge because we know of the impact that it can have. And, we also know that, the I suppose the state of the world, it can be very disheartening. And I think what I'm feeling right now firstly, I feel very grateful for this opportunity to talk about this with you, and I feel very blessed that an organization like yours exists, because I feel like the fact that we have these pockets of humanity that are focused on cultivating the spiritual development of the child, that are focused on acts of kindness, that are wanting to cultivate more oxytocin in the world, it really brings me hope. And I think, I just feel really, really deep appreciation for that. And it nourishes me in this moment, and as a result, it nourishes my connection with my children and my family, and that will have a ripple effect into my world. And so, I just, it's very much stream of consciousness what I'm sharing right now, but I'm seeing actually at the same time how simple it is, and so thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Ruth. Thank you so much.
Ruth. Yes. I mean, the appreciation for you and the work that you're doing in the world brings us much joy. And we're so glad that we found each other.
Yes.
Right? We can continue this conversation. And hopefully this, I don't know what to call it, like service to life. I mean, I don't know, ministry to life, I'm not sure, but I am very grateful to know of it and to delight in the pondering of it.
Thank you. Thank you both so very much.
Thank you all for listening to this week's episode of the Good Shepherd and the Child podcast. So in our show notes, you will find a link if you are interested in learning more about the Basic Needs of Babies course that Ruth and Karen have available. I also have a link for Ruth's book that she wrote, The Basic Needs of a Woman in Labor. That is really wonderful. As well as Ruth's personal site, truemidwifery.com. Don't forget that you are able to submit questions for the podcast in order for us to answer them and help you in any way that we possibly can. We would love to hear from you and see if there's anything specific that you would like to hear about, or that you are struggling with, that you would like a seasoned catechist, a seasoned formation leader to answer for you on the podcast. There's a link to that in our show notes as well. We also have the audio version of the third edition of The Religious Potential of the Child by Sophia Cavalletti, read by Rebecca Roitsevich, available for purchasing. So if you would like to access that, in our show notes, I have some links to the step-by-steps on how to access that book. This podcast is sponsored by the United States Association of the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. We would like to thank all the contributing members, because you are making this podcast possible. If you would like to know more about the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, or if you would like to become a member and support our work and have access to the member-only content that we provide, please go to cgsusa.org. Thank you all for listening. We will see you in 2 weeks. Go and fall more deeply in love with God.